Hi, my name is Joanne from 123stitch.com. Let's say you have found a cross-stitch pattern that you absolutely love, but it says something mysterious like stitch with 2 strands over 2 threads, or even worse, it just says to stitch 2 over 2. What does that even mean? Don't worry, it confused all of us at first, but it's actually quite simple. Today I'm going to explain and demonstrate how to stitch over 2 threads. Before we get started though, please go down below and click on that subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything. Now, when we talk about cross-stitch fabric, it is described by count and type. So on a 14 count fabric, it's going to tell me how many threads there are in an inch. 14 count fabric has 14 threads in 1 inch. If I were to stitch 14 X's, they would measure 1 inch. If I had a 16 count fabric, I could get 16 X's in that same inch. Now, when we get to higher count fabrics like 25, 28, 32 count, the threads are closer together and the holes are less visible. If we were to stitch on this fabric the same way we did on the 14 count, we would have teeny tiny X's. I would have, for instance, 28 tiny X's in an inch on a 28 count fabric. On a 32 count fabric, there'd be 32 X's in that same inch. Fortunately, most patterns using higher count fabrics have you stitch over 2 threads. Now, if you've been stitching on Aida, you've been bringing your needle up through one hole, counting up 1 thread over 1 thread, and putting it back down again. This is essentially stitching over 1 thread. When we stitch over 2 threads, we bring our needle up through the hole, count up 2 threads, over 2 threads, and then put it back down again. This is what's called stitching over 2 threads. Let me demonstrate for you. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate first on graph paper because I think that's the easiest way to demonstrate the process. The squares on my graph paper represent the holes in my fabric and the lines represent the threads. So I'm going to bring my needle up in one hole, up 1 thread over 1 thread, and that is stitching over 1 thread. To stitch over 2 threads, I'm going to bring my needle up in one hole. I'm going to count up 1, 2 threads, over 1, 2 threads, and bring my needle back down again. That's stitching over 2. But if it makes it easier to count, we can bring our needle up and then count diagonally 1, 2. That's how you do it. But let's look at it on fabric to see what that looks like. Here I've got a 28 count even weave fabric. There's a few stitches on there, but we're going to start in a different area. We've got our needle up in one hole. We're going to count up 1, 2, and then over 1, 2, and bring our needle back down again. Down 2, and over. And what this is doing is leaving an empty hole in between each time. Bring it over 2, and down. This gets much easier the more stitches you have in because you can see exactly where your next stitch needs to go. Now, if it's easier, remember you can count diagonally. So we'll bring our needle up and then we're going to count diagonally. 1 space, 2 spaces. There you go. That's how you stitch over 2. It looks pretty easy, but a couple of tips. It's easy to get off, meaning pick up an extra thread or go 1 thread less. Usually I end up doing 3 threads instead of 1. So it'd be 1, 2, and I'd accidentally end up here, and it'd be a little while before you realize that you're off, so you have to go back and fix it. So make sure you're always just over 2 threads. Now, an advantage to stitching over 2 threads is fractional stitches are a whole lot easier because you have those extra holes there. So let's see what that looks like. We bring our needle up, over, and then to do the fractional, we bring our needle up in the bottom, and then because there's an empty hole in the middle, I can easily stick my needle in there and get a perfect fractional stitch. That's harder to do on an Aida. You can do it with a sharp needle, but it's much easier when you're doing a higher count fabric at over 2. Now, a couple of tips, make sure you count often so that you're not picking up that extra thread. And then also, if you're tempted to skip to do another area because it's got the same color, whatever, you want to stitch here next, I would be careful about going too far away because even though it may be 10 stitches away, it's 20 threads. So you have to make sure you counted that just right. Otherwise, you're going to get up there later on and realize that you are off. So I tend not to skip around too much when I'm counting, stitching over 2. But that's all there is to it. So nothing difficult about it. It just takes a little bit of practice and then you will be an expert at it. Okay, I hope that all made sense. But what I suggest you do is practice. Get a piece of maybe 25 or 28 count fabric, such as a Lugana, and just practice making stitches until you feel more comfortable with it. And if you decide stitching over 2 is not for you, not a problem. Stick with whatever makes you happy because that's what stitching is all about. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and I will see you again next time.